Hello, World Singers. My name is Tyler.
And my name is Brooke.
And this is
Cosmere
Cosmere Conversations. Oh, what a miraculous beginning to 2026 we have had. Thank you all so much for sharing, listening, and commenting on our episode with Paladin Creative last time. It was so much fun. There has been great response, great feedback, and I think that overall it was just the most epic of conversations that we have had, interview style.
Yeah, it was so great to talk to them. And then it was also really great to hear the response from listeners afterwards saying that, it brought them back to a really joyful moment of being at the World Hopper Ball. So that was really great to see as well. This episode, we are diving back into our characters from Wind and Truth series. And this time we're going to be talking about everybody's favorite, the best boy, Adolin Kholin.
Ever heard of him? I have. I certainly have. And I think that for a lot of people, Adolin was their favorite part of Wind and Truth. And the journey that Adolin was on really struck a chord with a lot of people. He has an emotional arc that is great, but he also has the action. And it's just so impactful and meaningful where he is left at the end of Wind and Truth.
Yeah, Adolin's arc in Wind and Truth is everything. I think it's such a wonderful depiction of a character going through both a physical journey, as you said, he's in all of these battles, etc., and also really specific and meaningful character growth internally. When we start Wind and Truth, Adolin is still harboring a lot of resentment towards Dalinar, his father, for killing his mother in the past. Now, this is one of the things that really confuses me sometimes because the time in the story is so quick, but the books are coming out many years apart. And so this revelation that Dalinar actually killed Evie happened way back in Oathbringer, which came out in 2017 or something. Yeah. And so there is always part of me when this comes up that like Adolin is feeling resentment towards his father, that I'm like, man, that was forever ago. Like, you're still upset. But for Adolin, it's really only been kind of at max a year, because they find out when Dalinar actually publishes the in-world book Oathbringer. So we have to like kind of factor in some time for him to write and publish the book. But, relatively recently, this revelation has happened. And so, of course, Adolin is still upset about this very intense fact that he has learned.
And I think that for Adolin, as is true for a lot of people, there is a kind of acknowledgement in waves. We have to remember, Rhythm of War has a year gap, but it's a year of war. Just like constant fighting, constant battles, go, 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 go. Kaladin, is kind of our character that we follow through that journey, and it's like wearing him down and he needs to take a break. But Adolin's doing the same thing. He has this revelation, we'll call it at the very end of Oathbringer, and there might have been a first wave of acceptance, a kind of like, okay, that's information. I've acknowledged it. I need to move on because I'm leading these soldiers, I'm fighting these battles, and not really a true acknowledgement. And then, of course, that never stops. The speed, the constant struggle is only continuing. And just like we talked about last time with Kaladin, who had to like make space for himself, Adolin maybe never got an opportunity to truly process what this meant and what it did to his family. I think that that's why in Wind and Truth, we have the moments of like Adolin venting anger that he just never got to actually like process or emote out into the world.
He does talk about it in Rhythm of War, but as you said, there's just a lot of other things going on. And so it's still present in Wind and Truth. And unfortunately, Dalinar and Adolin don't really have the time or the space or the inclination to be able to reconcile before Adolin ends up leaving for Azimir.
Mhm.
But throughout his journey, the experiences that he has help him to eventually forgive Dalinar, even though they aren't able to have that reconciliation in person.
It's definitely one of the things that I felt most sad about
Yeah.
finishing Wind and Truth. I was just like, they leave on a bad note. Like, it is sad that their relationship, he has a moment, Dalinar has a moment when he like sends out love and power to Navani and Renarin and Adolin. But, you know, overall, they do have this kind of difficult relationship. Navani wants them to heal. They're
Yeah.
both too stubborn to do so. And, you know, I'm really mainly blaming Dalinar for that.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
way more on him than it is on Adolin. And I think that like the way that it's presented is Dalinar's like, well, you know, I have other things to do and he's a grown man and I can't force him.
Yeah, and I think weirdly, even though they're in a very clear circumstance where they have 10 days until the end of the world,
Right.
there's still kind of an attitude that I think is just human of like, there will be time.
Hmm.
There'll be time, like, we don't need to force it right now because it'll happen. Like, it is going to happen. We know we're both going to forgive each other and, like, we will heal and it'll happen at some point. Even though they're in this situation where they have a very clear sort of deadline. And this was something that I kind of struggled with Dalinar's storyline at the end, where I feel kind of angry at him for just leaving Navani,
Hmm.
leaving his sons without having like a meaningful sort of send off, I suppose. But I think that that is a trade off, a sacrifice that you make to be a hero, kind of like not very many heroes are, you know, passing away at 95 in their beds, just surrounded by their loved ones and having plenty of time to say all of the things that they've needed to say. One of the things that we sacrifice to become a hero is some of those moments.
I agree. And Adolin is sacrificing a lot as well. He is going to, we hear off screen that he turned down the line of succession. That's why it gets to Kaladin being adopted into the family, like we talked about last time. However, you mentioned, and I think this is of note, he does feel guilty about maybe that decision, or he has a kind of realization that, no, I am ready or I am the leader.
Yeah, I think he realizes that that decision was made based on guilt or based on fear,
Hmm.
based on his feeling about the fact that in Oathbringer, he has left his home city, the city that he was supposed to rule of
Right.
Alethkar. He left it to be taken over by Odium's forces. And he allows the negative feelings that he has from that experience guide his actions going forward, which is what leads him to turn down the line of succession. Part of his journey in Wind and Truth is realizing that maybe that's not like a great way to make decisions, and he can accept his failings in the past and say that actually I am going to sort of accept the vulnerability, accept the fact that as a leader I am probably going to fail the people that I rule again, and it's worth it. It's worth me at least trying to do something good, to be the leader that I am meant to be.
And a good sign for his leadership role, the man's learning to read.
Oh
We
my gosh, yes.
we hear this at the end of Wind and Truth. Quote, he was haltingly learning to read because if he could never see his father again, he could try to understand the man. End quote.
He is trying to learn to read so that he can read Oathbringer, his father's memoir, to try to get closer to this man that he sort of has realized he never really knew. And that's such a beautiful moment. It's one of the things at the end of the book that just makes me want to cry. It's so sweet.
We also have a scene that's reminiscent of Dalinar with The Way of Kings, but now this time Adolin with Oathbringer, where we hear, quote, Adolin felt a warmth he could not explain, perhaps just from the sunlight, but it seemed something more. Book snug under his arm, he felt like somewhere his father was smiling at him. Adolin quietly raised his fist over his head, saluting the triumphant sun, end quote.
I'm really looking forward to this future world where not just Adolin, but other men begin reading as well. It's definitely a new era in Rasharan culture.
Obviously, we're big fans of reading, so I think
Yes.
that it's good. We like to see it happen for all of the fellas out there. And one of the things that I feel is likely the most important development in Wind and Truth is Adolin's relationship with Maya and the development of the Unoathed. We're going to talk about that a lot and kind of put it all in perspective. But let's begin with Maya. Rhythm of War, they go to the Honorspren city, the Honorspren home city of lasting integrity. Maya has her moment. We chose lots of great stuff, but this is putting Adolin in a situation where he knew there was something about Maya. He knew that relationship was there, and now it is becoming real. It's like actually happening and developing, and we see that come with a lot of new capabilities.
Yes, Maya has a lot of new capabilities in Wind and Truth. For example, Adolin and Maya are able to speak mind to mind, which not every, even Knight Radiant and their Spren, are able to do. He also now has the ability to summon Maya as a blade immediately. He no longer has to wait 10 heartbeats. And we see little hints at this in previous books. And in Wind and Truth, we see it fully with no wait time at all.
And he's like conscious of the fact that he's doing
Yes.
it. Where previously it was like, oh, it was a little quicker.
Yeah,
but I don't know
is
what's
that
happening.
just because my like heart was beating faster?
Right. But no, this is just like, I need the blade. I have the blade. And because Maya's journey, they separate, he knows at any moment he could snap her back to him, but obviously is going to refuse to do so. We also know that Maya has the ability to see through his eyes and can give perspective on what's going on in Shadesmar. So they can
Yeah, she can do both. So she can tell Adolin like, hey, this is what's going on this side. And then she can also see through Adolin's eyes and give like ideas about tactics or thoughts on how to approach a battle, etc. And then Adolin can even sometimes see through Maya's eyes into Shadesmar, or at the very least sort of get like an impression of her thoughts or emotions. So this relationship, I'm hesitant to call it a bond because it certainly seems different than the Nahel bond, and maybe it has a different name that we just haven't named yet, but this relationship is certainly getting stronger and becoming more similar to the Nahel bond.
That's true. And I don't want to use this label really definitively, but we know that there is another bond, the Luhel bond on Lumar with the Aethers and the spores there. We also know that there's a Nahel bond not with Spren. It's labeled as such with the Aviar.
Yeah.
And so these other bonds, are they identical? No. And the kind of variation might lead us to use some of the same language. Like Nahel bond is used with the Aviar, but we maybe wouldn't use Nahel bond with Maya and Adolin. But maybe it's something closer to a Luhel bond.
I think that the Luhel bond it's more transactional from at least what we see.
Water for...
Yes. Yeah. It's a more direct exchange, which I don't think is what is really happening with Adolin and Maya. If anything, it's sort of the opposite direction of like, yeah, this isn't really a structured thing. We're just kind of doing it and it's happening. They don't even really have the structure of ideals, right? Which is the thing that Knights Radiant bonds are using. I think this may also be a Nahel bond, just looking differently than we've seen it before. Because to your point, the Aviar are also a Nahel bond. Those guys aren't saying ideals, right? It's just this consenting exchange between two entities that have sort of agreed to be bonded.
Yeah, and in Isles of the Emberdark, we see that there is shared skills back and forth.
Yeah.
Dusk does something, and that leads to changes in the abilities of his AVR, and of course, vice versa. They're giving their skills to Dusk. And so, mainly, as is usually the case, what we think we know is not the full extent of what is possible. To me, this is most apparent when Maya starts to change forms slightly. The blade grows longer than it has
Yeah.
otherwise been, hinting at the fact that like the shard blades are not permanently locked in one state.
Dead blades, you mean the Deadeye blades?
Yes, the
Yeah.
Deadeye blades are not locked in. They are more akin to the changing forms that Kaladin, shows most dramatically. But I also think that it's important to remember that Nomad, Sixel, in the future, has an incredible control over the changing forms.
Yeah.
And Ox, his Spren, is kind of close to a Deadeye Spren at that point. Like, he's not fully
Is
dead.
he?
Well,
Yeah.
he had
Yeah.
the traumatic event.
Right. He doesn't have a body.
Right. And
Really.
like he is very limited. And yet Ox is still being manipulated into multiple forms.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot that we don't know, but clearly the static nature of shard blades is something more akin to a choice, or it's just not a permanent reality.
And this is in part, this change in Maya is in part due to Urethiru and the
Mhm.
sibling having been revitalized in Rhythm of War. Quote, she had been changing quickly ever since their visit to the tower. A living Urethiru appeared to have invigorated her and had also somehow strengthened whatever was happening between them, end quote. And then also, quote, she said the light of the tower made her feel refreshed, end quote. We hear things like this a few different times. It's unclear to me exactly why this is happening or what exactly is happening because of the tower. Like, why would that have such an impact on the Radiant Bond, on Deadeye Spren? We know there's also something happening with Mishram that gives some kind of new life to Spren and Deadeyes. I'm really excited to figure out what is happening there and to see how Spren and Spren life and Spren bonds have changed in the second half of Stormlight Archive.
We also know, and I just want to call out, that the wind was impacted by the changing of vessels with odium and kind of like
Right.
brought back a little bit more to life. I think all of these things have something to do with the true tones of Rashar, or like the natural power of Rashar. The sibling is part of that. And when the sibling is shut down, maybe it's like an instrument is not playing in the orchestra. And so like once the sibling picks up her violin or oboe or whatever she is and starts playing, the true song of Rashar is a little bit closer to what it's supposed to be. The Spren sense that, the Spren feel that, and they gain power or something from it. Let us know if you have some speculation regarding the reemergence of the sibling, Ba'edo Mishram, and how that impacts all of the Spren. But what I want to do now is talk a little bit about Adolin's philosophy, because it's like a growing philosophy throughout Wind and Truth, and maybe one of the most important philosophies going forward. In a lot of ways, it's anti-Dalinar.
Yeah.
And in many ways, it's anti-everything that we have come to believe is, good and noble. And instead, it is maybe of valor. This is the unoathed philosophy, or the anti-oath philosophy, the pro-promises philosophy. Let's develop into, because Adolin's going to write a book. You know that he's going to read Oathbringer. He's going to learn some stuff from his dad, but eventually
he's going to name it Promise Bringer.
I think that he is definitely on his way to writing an in-world text.
Yeah, I love that, actually. I love that speculation because I don't necessarily want to think about this as being like anti-Dalinar. I want to think about it more like all parents sort of pave the road for their children to build on top of what they've done, right? So like Dalinar had to swear oaths so that Adolin could change it to be promises instead.
We
You
stand on the
know?
shoulders of giants type of
Yeah,
thing.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. We had to go through our oath phase so that we could get to our promises phase. I really loved this part of Adolin's story. It's kind of how I have felt the entire journey of the Stormlight
Yeah,
Archive
you've
of
never
just
been big on
I've
oaths.
never been really big on the oaths. I've just always felt like this seems really arbitrary, and I don't like that there are so many just very strict rules here. They
Right.
should be able to change their minds. I really value the ability to change my mind, for me to be able to change. I want characters to be able to change and grow. And that might mean that they need to like do something different than an oath that they swore or whatnot. It just seems very constrictive to me.
Yeah, and I think Brandon agrees with you
Yeah.
and like has developed that, starting with maybe the more traditional, or Aragorn from Lord of the Rings, the kind of return of the king, the return of nobility, the return of oaths and like doing the right thing and honor. All of those aspects are what we begin with when it comes to Dalinar.
If only that's what honor actually was in the Stormlight Archive.
Oh,
But
it's done? Yeah.
I'm never gonna let go of the fact that honor is not actually honor in the way that we want it to be. Honor is just rules.
Right.
And following rules to the T.
Yes, 100%. And we've talked about that
And
kind
the
of
artist
distinction.
in me is just like, no rules. You can't tell me what to do.
You Jackson Pollock the whole thing,
Yeah,
and you're just like,
exactly.
it's still beautiful.
It's like, gravity doesn't exist.
Reality is what you decide it to be. But I've also said the same thing when it comes to Spren relationships, the powers, everything that is going on is kind of built on rules that were set by Honor the Shard.
And Ishar, the Herald.
Exactly. And so like what happens when those two beings are not in charge anymore? And the answer simply is we don't know. But what Adolin discovers and is kind of developing as his philosophy begins with this quote, "You know what I'd admire? A man who gave an oath, then realized it was storming stupid and broke it, apologized and moved on with his life, determined not to make that kind of mistake again." End quote.
Preach. Preach, my boy.
Now, of course, this is also what Dalinar does at the end.
Yeah.
Basically saying the same thing. This is dumb. This contract,
Right.
I invalidate. Like, I'm never going to win. You're a god. I'm not. I'm not going to.
And I'm not going to play by the rules.
Exactly. Like, the rules are designed for me to lose. I reject everything. And he does, kind of get a moment to apologize, but not really. What we are going to see is how Adolin takes that mantle and kind of like develops it. Dalinar did one act of Adolin's philosophy. Adolin's going to have to live with his philosophy.
Yeah. And he gives a great description of the difference between an oath and a promise. This is how he thinks about them for himself, the distinction as Adolin sees it. Quote, "An oath could be broken, but a promise stood as long as you were still trying. A promise understood that sometimes your best wasn't enough. A promise cried with you when all went to damnation. A promise came to help you when you could barely stand, because a promise knew that sometimes being there was all you could offer." End quote. And this like kind of breaks my heart, because I think back to Words of Radiance when Kaladin is in his conundrum of having these two oaths that he is sworn, and he's really struggling, but he is trying and he doesn't necessarily know what to do. And he gets put in this really difficult position. And this promise philosophy is so much gentler and so much kinder and so much more understanding for the fluid nature of what it is to be a human on this earth.
Well, and I also think what I like so much about Wind and Truth and Adolin's journey specifically is how Maya's story is interwoven with Adolin's. Hers is ancient, of course, dating back to the Recreants, but like those people made oaths. They swore ideals. those ideals had to follow Honor, who was stronger at that point in time. The heralds were gone, yes, but had been a more impactful, and like everything about the heraldic epics was closer to Maya and her radiance and all the radiance at that time. And they chose to do something different and to behave differently. And Adolin is making his own choices, different from his society, different from his father. And that is why I like their relationship and their creation of the Unoathed so much, because it does feel more naturalistic. It feels more honest. It
Yeah.
feels less about, oh, I made one oath and then I made another oath and they are conflicting oaths. I'm broken. It's like there's this phrase in the legal world, de jure versus de facto. De facto being what are the specific words and letters that make up the law. De
Mm-hmm.
jure is what is the spirit of the law. We've talked about this a lot
Yeah.
in terms of the division between Skybreakers and Windrunners. And I think, Adolin versus Kaladin, Kaladin is still kind of wrapped up in the de facto, especially in Words of Radiance.
Yeah.
He's just like, oh, I made two I made two oaths and I am caught in between them. Adolin is saying like, what is the spirit of what I am trying to get across and what
Yeah.
I'm trying to convey and the life that I'm trying to lead? It's more honest in a lot of the respects.
And I do think that he only is able to get there because he exists outside of the system.
Right.
He's not a Knight Radiant.
Yes.
And so he kind of has to define for himself what it looks like to live a life that is aligned with his values. He doesn't have a spren who is asking him to square specific ideals and oaths in order to, achieve certain milestones, etc. Like he has to sort of build his own worldview without that existing structure. And that is a huge part of what we see from Adolin and his character growth in this book. He goes through an incredible amount of change and growth. He has so many really, really humbling experiences. And it is only by being brought as low as possible that he is then able to ascend to his sort of rightful place as a leader. I think up until Wind and Truth, while I think most of us would say that Adolin is a really great guy, he still has this sort of attitude of holding himself above other people, maybe morally. He also holds himself to just an impossibly high standard, and he gets really angry with other people, namely his father, when they don't meet those high standards. But because of this, he also never feels like he's enough. And we see him confront all of these things in Wind and Truth.
Definitely. He has to face the fact that he has failed in the past, he is failing in the present, and that he is going to fail again in the future. And that all is happening within the 10-day period. And so, like you said, I think he has more character growth than anyone else in this
Absolutely.
book.
Yeah.
I mean, Zeth is kind of the other one who does develop Kaladin a little bit, but Adolin is, to me, at the top of the list in terms of character growth because of this acknowledgement of the past, his own failings, and how that's going to impact him in the future. It's a little bit like what Kaladin got in Rhythm of War when like he's at his lowest point, trapped by Odium, being tortured mentally, and Hoyd says, you will be warm again, and then it will get hard, and then it will get better, and then it will get hard again. And it's not just up from here. You've hit the bottom and now you're going to the top. Like, unfortunately, that's not an honest reality. Adolin is acknowledging the same thing without the benefit of having Hoyd tell him the story of the dog and the dragon. I think another important aspect of Adolin's growth is the recognition of his privilege, his position in society. We hear this, quote, he'd been complaining since the fall of Kholinar, maybe longer, about how the world had changed, outgrown people like him. However, last night, he'd been a common spearman. Adolin realized right then that the world hadn't changed that much. The Dark Eyes had always felt small in the world of Shardbearers. Adolin's place had changed. He'd been complaining about suddenly being one of the small ones, a reality that the vast majority of soldiers lived with every day, end quote.
Such a beautiful description of this person who has always been part of the group in power,
Hmm.
suddenly realizing, like broadening his view, the camera zooming out, and him understanding his true place. And not only does he experience this in a philosophical way, but very literally and immediately as he is injured and thrust into battle in a way that he's not experienced in the past. He's always had this privileged position as a shard bearer where he's been quite protected and very powerful. And then suddenly he is forced into, the same basic concept of a battle
Hmm.
without those privileges.
Yeah. And I think from the tactical standpoint, I mean, Brandon did talk a lot about how he liked writing those scenes with Adolin fighting in Azimir, the battle strategy and everything that was going on. But I think that Adolin probably, even if he wasn't wearing his shard plate, would have been treated as a prince of
Of course,
Alethkar
of
on the
course.
battlefield. He would be surrounded by an honor guard. Every strategic and tactical movement on the battlefield would kind of be about him or his position, if that's charging on horseback or whatever
But
it
I
is.
think from Adolin's perspective, he is thinking, oh, I'm not that prince,
Right.
right? Like, I'm not sitting at the back of my troops just giving orders. This is, like I was saying
Hmm.
before, his like moral superiority, where he's like, oh, I'm a really good person
Right.
because me and Dalinar are actually jumping ahead of our men.
Exactly.
We're like taking this big risk. We're being good people and doing it, the right way. And so I am sort of, and I'm not saying he necessarily needs blame for this. That is a good thing to do, but it's still very different from a regular soldier or, God forbid, a bridge crew.
Of course. Yeah. He's not regular and he's
Yeah.
never been regular.
Yeah.
And then two things happen in quick succession, along with the fact that they are losing and he knows that they are going to lose this city. He is in a fight with a Thunderclass. He uses a blade that is not Maya in order to attempt to take down this beast that is so beyond the capabilities of anyone that I'm guessing in the past, like Thunderclass were used to kill Radiants. Like that was their primary role. Obviously, like Fused do that in a similar regard, but just like if you send in a Thunderclass to a regular battle, the monster creature is so beyond what anybody can deal with.
Yeah.
The only thing that can take it down are heralds or probably multiple Knights Radiant. And I'm guessing that's why like Windrunners have a tremendous number of squires. It's just so they can fight things like Thunderclass. Adolin goes up. I mean, very quickly, he is made alone. Everybody else is killed
Yeah.
in that fight, and he is fighting the Thunderclass alone. He loses. The Thunderclass falls on top of him, pins his leg, functionally obliterating it, and he's brought back to the rear lines where his immediate wound is healed, but not by someone like Renarin who can regrow the limb. Because the overall army is losing, they're down to the very last reserve. He's sent in to be a spearman and he's got one leg. I think he's had like 1 day to recover from that trauma before he's made to be a spearman. And it's just, I know this is silly, but it's kind of like that show Undercover Boss, where the boss has to, live a normal life, work in their company as a normal person. This is what normal spearmen have to do all the time. They get injured. Guess what? There's no regrowth. If there was some great surgeon, they don't focus on the dark eyes. They're spending time healing all the light eyes. Adolin is brought really, really low. It seems like everything is ending for him. I legitimately thought Adolin was slowly moving to his death, kind of in the way that Dalinar dramatically goes to his death at the end. I thought we were like seeing a mimicked type of experience where we were just going to watch Adolin's slow decline into being killed, and then Dalinar triumphant moment, but like loses the battle and dies himself.
Yeah, there are a couple of moments in Adolin's storyline where I legitimately was considering the possibility that he might die. And Adolin feels the same way. Like, there are a few moments in a couple of different battles when he comes very close to death and is facing all of the kinds of thoughts that you have in that type of scenario. of, these could be my last moments. What do I really want them to be like? And what is actually important to me? This is what leads him to being able to find forgiveness with his father, with the reality of his own life and death truly staring him in the face. He's finally able to see that while what Dalinar did was terrible, yes, the relationship that he has with his father is more important, is the most important thing. And he is able to offer that forgiveness. He's also able to offer forgiveness to himself, to past him for his failings. And again, to step into who he wants to be, which is a leader.
Again, I know we just covered Kaladin, but there are a lot of similarities here. Kaladin is making space for himself to be something other than a soldier.
Yeah.
Adolin is making space for him to be the man and the leader that he wants to be. And they're on different paths, they're on different journeys. But I think that that is the connective tissue in Wind and Truth. And it's why I've come to like it more the more that I reread it. It's that not all the characters are together. It doesn't necessarily feel like this climactic book. Instead, all the stories are separate, but they are interwoven, capital C connected by brilliant blue lines of investiture.
And they're parallel, right?
Yes.
Like, what is the quote that like a true friend isn't staring into your eyes, but like you're both facing in the same direction or something?
Walking side by side on the path, just like, Frodo and Sam, but they're moving on the path together. Every step,
right.
They're right there. When you get weak, I help you. Adolin has that experience in a really dramatic fashion because he's fighting Abadai the Monarch and he is incredibly disadvantaged. He is, trapped in an aluminum lined room of their own creation.
Without his shards, fighting a shard bearer with a peg leg.
With the peg leg. And once again, it seems like he's probably going down.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was like, how? There's no way. How is he going to get out of this? And then he is literally saved because of the relationships that he has forged by just being a decent person, essentially, because he has this habit of talking to his sword and then he expands that to talking to his shard plate. And the shard plate that Abadai is wearing is Adolin's old plate. And at some point it recognizes him and it's like, hey, actually, we're going to come protect you instead. And so all of these sort of little choices that Adolin has made throughout the books that most of society thought he was really weird for doing, and he saw as just sort of basic decency of being kind and considerate to the people and the tools and the entities around him, literally saves his life.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, he displays it in so many fashions, and that's how we know it is real and authentic, because all the way back the first time we meet him in Way of Kings, he is saving the prostitute, right?
Yeah.
He's talking to his blade, he's talking to his plate, he's talking to Sureblood and then to Gallant, and he's treating them as like real cognizant beings.
People,
that are,
with thoughts and feelings.
Exactly. And he's never, as you said, he sees himself as morally superior in a lot of ways, capable of making great decisions, but he's also not forgetting about other people.
Yeah.
And he keeps them in his mind while he is making those decisions. And I think that that's definitely on display with his relationship with Yanagon.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, right. Because not only does he treat people who are quote unquote below him with respect and kindness and like they're real people, but he is also treating Yanagon, this person who is quote unquote above him, as a real full person with thoughts and feelings who is more than his office.
And their relationship, their friendship that grows over Wind and Truth, they're playing the towers, they're learning strategy. And I love it so much. Every scene with them, I just want more. And I want them to have a long 10-year best friendship where they grow up together and Adolin is doing military stuff and Yanagon's leading the people. And then, we return in Stormlight 6 and they're just like the two best friends that anyone has had. And they're just so happy with one another because they base their relationship on this honest connection and treating each other like normal people. He says at one point, not to Yanagon directly, but to the advisor. I
Yeah,
think it's
Nora.
Nora. He says, like, the thing Yanagon needs most is a friend.
Yeah.
Like, you are treating him well. You obviously care about him, Nora, but the way that you are treating him will not help him in the long run. And the best thing that he could have right now is a friend. That's developed, or, you know, it's cemented in Wind and Truth. And I hope that we get to see a lot more of their friendship because I loved it so much.
Strong agree.
This brings me to kind of a unique aspect, and I think it will take us into the Unoathed. If Adolin was a Radiant with the shard plate and shard blade that he has, he would be a mixed Radiant. Maya's a cultivation sprint.
Yeah.
Obviously. His shard plate, still a little bit questionable, but I thought it was Stone Ward, like not the peak spren, but the sub spren that peak spren relate to.
I think that it is Dustbringer plate because it's
Ooh.
described with like orange red kind of fiery imagery in the book several times and described as looking like embers when it finally sort of comes fully alive.
Yeah, there's that one image of Talm in plate. And so that's why I thought it was Stoneward, because your description to me lines up with the image of Talm, but also
But Dustbringers are the ones that have like the fire skill.
they have fire, but like Peak Spren in their true form, in their cognitive realm form, look kind of like at least what I thought the description was, which is they have cracks and then those cracks are filled with like lava, or it looks like, you know, orange fire coming from within. And I thought that was mimicked on Talm's shard plate. You think it is more the Dustbringers, who we don't know enough. I mean, technically I can go into the Cosmere RPG and look it up, but it hasn't been shown in the novels at this point. So let us know what you think Adolin's shard plate is, because I like the concept of the blended, not ideals, but the blended semi-ideals of edge dancers. I will remember those that are forgotten, or I will remember the small folk. That's very Adolin-esque. And then the Stone Wards are, I will be there for those when they need me. That's very Adolin-esque. And I just felt like it was a great combination. You're saying it's the Dustbringer.
Yeah, I think it could be both. The first time I read it, I thought Stoneward. I do think that the Stoneward ideals match up better. And then the second time or the third time I read it, I was like, wait, maybe I was wrong. This is like fiery. Maybe it's supposed to be Dustbringer. So I would love to hear what the audience hears. But yeah, this is a great jumping off place to start to talk about the Unoathed, because Adolin and Maya and their kind of weird connection, bond, not bond, create the conditions for the Unoathed to even be possible. They're like sort of the example that people and Spren can work together in this way without a radiant bond. And speaking of Adolin and his power sort of being the relationships that he's cultivated and all of this work that he's done to try to be a decent person, treat people fairly, literally saving his life in the end. I think the Unoathed are another example of that, because every person in this group, they're kind of this adorable collection of misfit toys.
Yeah.
That Adolin has like allowed to flourish in a way that maybe the society around them wasn't allowing for. We have Adolin, this, you know, prince who's abdicated his responsibility, who has shard plate but isn't quite a radiant. We have Yanagon, who is the emperor, and Adolin just allows him to also be a 15-year-old boy or whatever he is. There is his friend Kolot, who tried to be a windrunner but was rejected because he has light eyes.
And then we have Zarb Kushkam, the Azish commander. We have his son, Gezamel. Then we have May Aladar.
Yeah, who is a woman, unusual for being a shard bearer, but she has always really loved the fighting arts and was never really able to get into them in the way that she wanted to because of her gender. Then we have Notum, literally a spren.
The weirdest.
Who has heard of a spren wearing shard plate?
Yeah, so many different aspects that need to be talked about when it comes to Notum. But we also have Zarkin. I don't know if that's how we're pronouncing it, but
Yeah, Sark Quinn, I think.
Sark Quinn, who, as far as we know, is someone who's trans.
Yes, they have filled out the paperwork to live as a man in Azish society. So they are also sort of on the fringes of maybe what is normally accepted in the rest of Rashar. And then we also have Zabra, who really is passionate about wanting to be a warrior, but she's very young and inexperienced. She's also a girl. But instead of Adolin just kicking her to the curb, basically, and saying, absolutely not, get out of here, you can't be anywhere near war, he says, look, you can't be a soldier right now, like you don't have the skills, but I will let you be involved and like see how an army works and start gaining the skills. And again, it comes to literally save his life, as she is part of this group of Unoathed that ends up winning the day.
Now, what I love about this group, yes, you called them the Misfit Toys, but let's go over and back to Kaladin, who often describes himself and the members of Bridge 4 as the spears that were unbroken. You find out which spears do not break, and those are the ones that are like most worn. Like you have to take them into battle. And then what does Kaladin become at the end? The Herald of Second Chances. Every one of these people needed a second chance.
Yeah.
Yonigon was literally dead and got a second chance at life.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Kolot tried to be a windrunner, failed, needed a second chance. Each of these people, second chance, second chance, second chance, second chance. And now the Unoathed is like their greatest example of what it means to be a second chance. I think this is Kaladin's crew right here. Like these are the people that are...
I mean, they're Adolin's crew.
They're Adolin's crew, yes. But like as a herald, like the heralds are also religious figures. The religious nature of a herald has followers and like believers. I feel like the Unoathed are the best example of real people who aspire to be like the heralds.
Yeah, I mean, if they had any idea that Kaladin had ascended to be a herald, they would probably be into it, but they don't.
They're gonna find out. They're gonna find out when it comes to Stormlight Backav. But I found that reality of the Unoathed and the connection to what I think is going to be like the religious following of Kaladin in the future to be very interesting, because like these are people that are second chance coded.
Yeah, well, and the Deadeye Spren that come to their aid are also getting a second chance.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is sort of the defining feature of the Unoathed. Right now, we have 10 of them, the Unoathed, 10 people who fought for and won the Aegis seat of power, who were voluntarily aided by Deadeye Plate and Blade Spren.
Yeah, this is important. Once again, like we chose, Maya needs to be like constantly brought up when it comes to the Unoathed. They're not forced. They choose the bond. They aid these 10. And so we have the blade and plate that goes along with a full radiant without the necessary ideals or development of those radiant bonds.
But also without the sort of enslavement of a shard bearer from Way of Kings, for example.
Definitely.
And this is really the most agency and awareness that we have seen from the Deadeyes in the entire series, which is maybe only possible because of like those improvements that we were talking about before with the tower now being alive. I'm not totally sure if the Deadeyes would have been able to have this kind of agency prior to Urithiru coming back.
Oh, I not only think it's about Urithiru, I think it's about Ba Mishram as well, because I don't know the exact timing, but I think that the Unoathed moment happens after or simultaneous with when Ba Mishram is freed by Renarin and Relaine.
I don't think so, because they have to win the seat of power before the 10 days are up.
And the contest happens after that, and the freedom of Ba Mishram happens after that?
Yeah, because there's a point where Dalinar is like in a vision or something. I think it's after he gets the power of honor and he is like, oh,
And
I
he's seen it
see like
happening.
2 people holding a gemstone over their heads or whatever. Like, I think it's
Okay,
all
so
happening quite quickly,
got it.
but for sure, winning the Aegis seat of power happens before the contest even
Okay,
begins.
got you. Okay, that makes sense, but ruins my theory. I, I
Yeah.
I definitely agree that the tower is a huge aspect. Maya's development of her capabilities and her powers is on display, but it's also maybe apparent for these 37 Deadeyes. So I think there are 28 remaining Deadeyes because Maya doesn't count as like one of the 37 that are brought. She brings
Yeah.
37 others.
Hmm.
9 of them go and bond the other unoath or are in relationship with the other unoath. So I think there's 28 possible available Deadeyes.
Right. So there is the possibility that the Unoathed can expand, but at least by the end of Win and Truth, their plan is to be super intentional about who they allow to join their ranks. It doesn't seem like they're, really eager to just be handing these things out like candy to a bunch of people. I think they're really looking for folks who are going to fit into their little collection of misfit toys and be people that will make promises and be responsible in this new, not bond, but relationship between humans and Spren.
I think it's similar to what Navani discovered and was working on before she was frozen in a coma.
Hmm. I mean, I think that was mostly Rushu's experiment, to give credit to the actual person working on the experiment.
Always good, always good. But this concept of not enslaving the Spren,
Right.
convincing them to work and
Right. Giving
cooperate.
them work for hire,
Yeah.
essentially.
Well, and I think it's very similar to the AVR with their trappers. That's not an
Right.
enslaved position,
Yeah.
and it needs and requires like a delicate hand, often taking years or a lot of time to fully develop those relationships. And so there's many different versions of this on display across the Cosmere, and now we just have another one. Sometimes Spren with other Spren. Again, I'm so blown away by the Nodum revelation.
Yeah, because that's sort of another puzzle piece to this question of like what is going on with Spren now
Hmm.
on Rashar, because Nodam is able to come to the physical realm by himself without a bond, retain his mental capacity,
Hmm.
appear full size. Like, he has so much agency and ability that we have not seen from any other Spren, particularly one that is not bonded in any way.
And then I think that there is another full Radiant Spren, yes, a Deadeyes, but that chooses to join with Nodum. So
Right. That's like,
there's
I'll be your blade.
exactly. So he's got like a buddy that could be an honor Spren or could be any other type of Spren. And they are working in cooperation. And then, of course, there's all the lesser Spren that make up his armor slash his body. Like it's just such a weird thing that we, as you said, haven't seen anything like it. And we thought these were like hard limits. We thought that, oh, Syl is developing into when she can have a full form or change her outfit or have a little bit
Right.
more
That it's like
personality.
because of the strength of the bond.
But clearly it's not. Nodum is doing it by himself without that type of bond before he's an unoath. And now I think it's just going to get stronger. Like he's going to get more, not independent fully, because obviously like there is something of a bond here, but functionally, yeah, I think Nodum represents maybe the highest version of what Rushu was working on. Is like he is the thing that Rushu kind of like understands the
I
lesser Spren
mean,
can exist as.
no, not really, because Rushu is still operating on more of a Luhel bond of
Sure,
like,
yeah,
hey,
just
I
a
have this
transaction.
thing that you want. You do something for me, and I'll do something for you. Nodum comes to the physical realm purely because he wants to.
Oh, of course. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, there's no
100%.
like, the only incentives for him are coming from inside himself, saying, this is something that I want to do. I am going to go to the physical realm and behave in this way because I want to, not necessarily because someone is offering me something that I want.
So, real quick, do you think the unoathed is a bond?
That's such a hard question.
I know it's a really hard question. I don't know the answer.
I I think that it is. And hot take, I think that it is a higher or better type of bond than the not hell bond. Or
I
maybe just a better version, like the most ideal version of a not hell bond.
I am inclined to agree because remember what we learned in Wind and Truth, the deep lore, the deep history, is that these power dynamics and relationships were all built mimicking Honor's decisions. So, like, Honor makes the heralds,
Right.
Odium makes the fuse, back and forth they go.
Yeah. And then the Spren were like, hey, we think we could do something kind of similar if
Exactly.
you want to partner up with us.
And so they mimic what the heralds are doing
And
and
it
they
was
mimic the
probably,
ideals.
yeah, like to your point, I think that the beginning of the Knights Radiant probably looked more like the Unoathed, with people
Yes,
meaning
the very
meaning
first
humans
generation.
and Spren simply coming together to say like, hey, I think we can help each other voluntarily.
Right.
And then we hear in the text
Hmm.
specifically that the Knights Radiant have sort of started happening, and then Ishar and Tanavast, these two dudes who just need to be in charge and in control of everything, are like, we should probably like put some structure on that. And they arbitrarily impose these orders of radiant and ideal
Yep.
templates, etc., onto the thing that's already sort of happening organically.
That's why I am inclined to agree that this is like the more naturalistic version of what always could have existed. And so why they call themselves the Unoathed, I do think this is like more in line with Rashar. This is more in line with the Spren. This is more in line with what quote unquote should exist. And yeah, we both got some problems with Honor. We both got some problems with Tanavast, but just like the strict rules and the strict ideals to both of us don't seem like the best thing. This seems better.
Yeah, of course. The people who are actually able to just do it voluntarily because they want to, because there is something that they have in common that they each want to fight for.
Do you want to move into the future?
Yes, I do. Looking forward to Adolin's future, Adolin is currently a prince in exile. He is in Azimir. He has recently recommitted to trying to help his people, the Alethi, and to take his place as their prince. It's going to be really interesting to see how that goes because Yasna and Renarin have just recently sort of parallel instituted a more democratic form of government for the Azish.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how much Adolin is really able to talk to them and be like, hey, ready to be a prince. And they're like, hey, sorry, we actually don't have a monarchy anymore. So you're too late, bud.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Adolin could be very George Washington-esque, where it's like he's their commander and he will also be their first president because of just like, the vibes, the
Yeah.
momentum that he has. But he could be elected, wink, wink. Yes, you are the prince. But wink, wink, he could be elected as the first ruler of.
Yeah, if they have like a prime minister or something.
Right, exactly. And that could be a good role for him, one that's not going to pass to his
Right.
lineage, which he may or may not have, question
We'll
mark.
see.
But he's certainly in a difficult spot. His kingdom is owned by Odium,
Yeah.
occupied by the Singers. Again, technically their land, all the way back to the ancient days.
Yeah.
And he is not only in Azimir, but Azimir is the only spot outside of Urithiru that has sunlight, that is not covered in darkness and controlled by Odium's forces. He's surrounded by the waters of the Pure Lake that were drained by cultivation. So, like, I have no idea if there's going to be ongoing military actions to like push out and gain land, through force. That was not supposed to happen. But then again, all the rules were broken. Remember, like Dalinar
Yeah.
said, nothing matters anymore. And that includes any promises of peace.
I see much more of a underground rebel force.
Star Wars-esque.
Yeah, rather than like a full-scale battle type situation, which I think will be kind of refreshing for a reader, having a slightly different landscape while still being able to get some of the action that we're so used to. That's my pitch.
Now, interestingly, there's also no more Stormlight. All Stormlight is gone.
Right.
The Unoathed, in my opinion, don't need Stormlight
Right.
in the way that the Radiants do. Like the
Well,
Spren pull the investiture they need from the spiritual realm or from the cognitive realm.
yeah, I don't think that the Radiants would need Stormlight in order to form their blades and plate. Because, as you said, those are alive Spren.
But to use their surges.
To use surges, they do.
Got it.
So, yeah, I don't think this is really going to affect the Unoathed at all because those are living Spren who are shapeshifting of their own choice and
Mhm.
volition, and they are made out of investiture so that they don't really need access to extra
Right.
investiture. This does mean, though, that, yeah, there are no surges, meaning there is no regrowth, meaning that Adolin is permanently disabled. Fortunately, he is able to use some of his shard plate as a prosthetic.
Something that they said they'd done in the past and knew the form to take.
Yeah, which is so fascinating and cool.
Certainly makes sense as well, but it also points to more types of like joining and like understanding that we didn't have. If you are using a prosthetic in the traditional sense, it's a piece of metal that's now your leg. But the Spren are a real thing. The Spren are living things. So it's more like a symbiotic relationship.
Yeah.
Will he have a prosthetic 100% of the time? Will his armor like shrink from full armor when he needs it down to just his prosthetic, but it will remain
that's my
there?
impression.
Yeah, and it's just like that's very interesting. He will become
so interesting.
part Spren.
I'm like just imagining now future Roshar, they're basically going to be living in like the Beauty and the Beast castle where all of your like environment and your tools are alive, you know, where like we're already seeing this happen with the Knights Radiant, where your pen that you're using to write with is a Spren.
Right.
And your fire in your hearth is a Spren. Like
is
you have
your plate Spren or something like flame
you have
Spren.
all of these living beings around you living in this symbiotic way, to go back to Rushu's experiment, right? That this is sort of how Spren are going to be employed in a way, or just live in a mixed society.
Yeah. Reminds me a little bit of Legend of Korra later seasons when like the
Sure.
divide between the spirit realm and the regular realm fall apart.
Yeah.
And so like the spirits are moving into and you got to like learn to live with them, and it's different, and you know their society has to adapt and change. In a similar way, as far as we know, Retribution's destruction of Stormlight, even though the Spren are protected by the Oath Pact, it does create a barrier for the Radiant Spren to be moving between the cognitive and physical realms. But not Maya. Maya seems to remain in the same state she was before, which might be because she's a Deadeye. Like she might have a unique type of connection to the cognitive realm because she's a Deadeye.
Yeah, it seems that most Radiant Spren are still not able to move in between, but Maya is able to, and that's how Adolin is able to get some information. Maya is able to travel through the cognitive realm and bring back information for him. But that's one of the only ways that they have right now of communicating between people and sharing information. And I don't know if this is also maybe related to Mishram. Again, such a question mark in my brain as to like how all of this is connected. But there is a quote saying that Mishram being freed specifically helped the Deadeye Spren. Quote, "Whatever your brother did, Adolin, it has helped the Deadeyes." End quote. So not all Spren, seemingly only the Deadeye Spren. So maybe that is the thing that is differentiating Maya from other Radiant Spren.
We really don't know because we didn't get as much about the Unmade and the backstory there as we thought we were going to.
Yeah.
But I do think that it points us in the direction of Ba-Edo Mishram was an essential part of Rashar. The Spren are an essential part of Rashar. And fixing Mishram fixed something that was broken and wrong about the planet.
But why would that only affect the Deadeyes and not all of the Spren then?
I think that the Deadeyes were the manifestation of the wrong. And so they're the thing that is getting fixed first. But I don't necessarily think it's the only thing. It's just like maybe over time we will see, like you were saying, more spren in the physical realm, or kind of like moving more freely. We might see, you know how there's like
Maybe
a little piece of the spren that makes up their presence in the physical form, but then there's a bigger
yeah.
part of them. So maybe Ba'edo Mishram is going to allow for more transfer, and you're going to see like more parts of the cognitive realm, the true form of the spren, shown in the physical realm.
Well, I'm thinking maybe it is because of like the Nahel bond, that because of the bond, there's like a heavier anchor on the physical realm side for the Radiant Spren. And because Maya's like not technically in a bond,
Mm-hmm.
she can flow both ways because she doesn't have that anchor on one side.
Yeah, I think
Just a
that sounds
thought.
right. No, I think that sounds right. Very quickly, before we wrap up here, let's talk about the thing that everybody wants to talk about. Is Shalom pregnant?
We have already talked about this quite a bit, but we do have to talk about it in relationship to Adolin, as well as we did in relationship to Shalon, because of course, if Shalon is pregnant, the baby is Adolin's.
That is true. They had sex on screen.
I mean, not fully on screen, but there is no doubt about it. There's not really any information in Wind and Truth about kind of where their relationship stands or is going even, but Maya at least is able to travel to Shadesmar, so there is a point of contact there. And Shalon has the Sion. We know she's sending a Sion to Adolin. So seemingly they will at least be able to talk, and there's still all the same question marks as to will they actually be able to see each other? Will they be reunited on screen or off screen? Will it take all the way until Stormlight Arc 2? Will there actually be a baby? We don't know.
We could attempt to speculate further, but it's just too big of a question mark. Like, it
Yeah.
changes so much of their stories. It drives a lot of potential plot to being around the child, or children, if you believe the extra special twin theories. But there is even some questions about like a stasis. Like, does Shalon age when she goes to the cognitive realm? Why would she not? But then again, at the same time, why would she? I don't know. And so there are people saying like whatever Shalon does while she's in the cognitive realm, like no time passes for her. I don't think
I
that
don't
that's
think
true, but
so. No, I think there actually is in book something about how the time will pass in the cognitive realm of Rashar versus the planet of Rashar versus everywhere outside of Rashar. And I do not believe that was that no time is going to pass.
right. But everything is kind of like up in the air. And that's
Yeah.
really where we are left on this front. For Adolin, there's also been speculation that this will like drive him into mimicking a lot of the problems that he had with Dalinar in being an absent father. Dalinar on campaign, Adolin forced separation because his children or child is in the cognitive realm. And like, how is he going to deal with being in that same position? I don't know. And I don't necessarily feel like the strongest advocate for theories on this topic, because I don't super believe that Shalon is pregnant still. I know that it makes no sense at all, and I'm just going to be out on a limb here, but that's where I'm at. It's whatever. It could happen. It might not happen.
Yeah, I think there's just so many questions and we're so far out that there is kind of no point in speculating on this specific point at this point, or at least that's not something that I'm super interested in speculating about, but it will certainly be something to keep eyes on and be aware of as we go into Arc 2.
Strongly agree, strongly love our best boy, Adolin Kholin. And as we said, in Wind and Truth, he maybe has the best journey of any
The
character.
true hero in Wind and Truth, in my opinion, the best storyline, just really solidified Adolin as my favorite character, one of my favorite characters. You know, he is up there for sure.
Thank you all so much for listening in. Please let us know about your insights and your thoughts. Remember, you can always join us for more over on Patreon. And And Brooke, can you take us away?
Until next time, life before death,
Strength before weakness.
journey before destination.